Hello. On today's video, I will be presenting some interesting aspects about laptop floppy drives. If you are quite interested in retro laptops, as I am, you may be thinking, or you may be starting from a very different perspective, one that you had as, let's say, a hobbyist of computer systems. And if you start from this perspective, and that's the most likely situation, you will be still under the impression that some devices, even if not all, may be replaced easily between laptops. And removable drives should have this capability. Unfortunately, as you will start to accumulate various retro laptops in your collection, you will quickly notice that there are some very unfortunate aspects that you have to consider. For instance, the first and the most obvious one is that you find it's very difficult to find replacements for a particular laptop. If you have a floppy drive that does not work, then it's quite difficult to find something that would fit and operate as needed. And I would like to share with you some of the details I have gathered in many years. Of course, if you are going to search forums or go on some websites, you may find easily about all these aspects. But if you're thinking about starting your laptop collection, or if you're thinking about adding various products, you're going to need some advice, and I think that this one is appropriate. So, what will we be covering here in this video? First of all, how different floppies for laptops are, and of course this is going to be the first issue. And the second one, that there are certain floppies that are very difficult to find in working condition. And that is because, and I will start with this, that is because they have a design flaw. Some floppy drives, and I think this one might be an example, it's a floppy drive that has been used in certain Toshiba laptops. If I remember correctly, although please forgive me if I'm saying something wrong, Toshiba Satellite Pro laptops that were built around 1996, and even other Toshiba laptops that were previously built, probably as far back as 1994 or even further than that, have an unfortunate situation. The fact that the floppy drive in itself, it's not turning bad. You don't have problems with the heads or with the mechanical systems for most situations, except for one particular aspect. The platter, and I mean a part that is inside and actually rotates your floppy drive, not the heads assembly, not the system that moves the heads in order to read and write the disk. The platter, the one that rotates the actual disk, is driven using a belt. And this is actually a very poor design decision. Most of these floppy drives have been manufactured by Citizen. They are not necessarily branded as such, because when you buy in bulk, just as Toshiba and other manufacturers did, they could brand them as they want. Unfortunately, the issue with the belt drive is the fact that, of course, it goes bad, because rubber is going to disintegrate or degrade, whatever you want to call, and from one point further, your floppy is not going to be spin, and this means that you're not going to be able to read. Unfortunately, even if you were to take apart the drive, you would soon find the situation that a compatible belt is very difficult to find, because you need to have specific size requirements, and this means that you may find one that is suitable, but it's not as easy as you think. And moreover, as we move further and further from devices that still use belts, like cassette players, the market is actually shrinking a lot. So you find a lot of difficulty in getting new belts and finding a reliable, let's say, selling channel that is going to be enough supplied with this. So this is one of the most important issues. And when you turn such a drive on, or you actually place a disk drive, floppy disk inside, and you try to access it, you'll notice that there is a very loud electric motor noise, and nothing happens. The motor spins at full speed, and however, the drive could not be read because obviously the disk is not spinning. And unfortunately, you may think, oh, yes, if I cannot find a suitable belt, or trying to replace it with another one is a difficult choice, then I will make an attempt at finding a replacement. Unfortunately, that is not as easy as it may seem, and I'm going to show you very quickly some issues. First of all, let's go back to our stack over here. The second drive you see over here, it's also from a Toshiba laptop. It's from a Satellite Pro lineup that has been released later than the one that had the drive that I shown you before. Unfortunately, there are some differences that make this drive unsuitable to be used as a replacement. First of all, let's look at some mechanical aspects. If you look closely, you're going to notice, of course, I should have placed it this way, you're going to notice that the exact position of the eject button is different. And I'm pretty sure that these differences are not stopping over there. Because as far as I can tell, some mounting holes, or the cable, that the interface cable, is being placed at a different position. And this means that even if you were going to take apart the case, because this is just a case ultimately, it's not, the floppy drive is not built as such. There is an adapter that makes the conversion from this internal connector into the typical connector you may find on a floppy drive, as you see over here. So this is one of the aspects. Of course, you're going to take apart the drive. Unfortunately, you cannot use it as a replacement because you have the issue of the connector not being exactly the same type. So if this one is for a ribbon, the connector that may be on this floppy drive may be just with pins, and this means that there is a difference. Or the connector may be suitable in order to convert it to this type of connector. So these are two common issues you're going to find. The fact that the connector may not be of the same type, and of course, perhaps even more importantly, that it may not be in the same place, because on certain floppy drives, and I don't know if I have one that was taken apart, because this is also another issue, the connector may not be precisely on the same spot. Right now I'm going to show you another floppy drive that, or actually two floppy drives that come from two compact systems. As you can see, this one is clearly labeled compact. Okay, and this one, although it looks slightly different, is also released under the compact branding. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, of course, these two units come from different laptops. But if you would look at this floppy drive, you may think that, oh, it's a nice one, and it was used in a laptop that was sold at quite a price. I think one that was over $1,000 when released. It was a compact LTE among the last lineups that were released. This one I think is quite certainly from a laptop that was a compact LTE 5000 series. This one is, I guess, somewhat of a 5000 series, but it's a newer model. Unfortunately, I can tell you certainly that this floppy disk drive, although you would have no indication, is also having the dreaded belt-driven platter. On the other hand, I can tell you certainly that this one, although it looks somewhat similar, is not. Unfortunately, you have no visual indication if a floppy drive is or isn't. You may look inside, and I will attempt to show you something, but I'm not entirely sure if this is going to cover or is going to be a useful guide. So let's try and see if I can make somewhat of a focus over here. Fortunately, I think I'm keeping it way too close. Okay, that's better. Well, if you were to look on the inside, and of course it's not very bright, you may find on this lower side, because of course you're trying to look for the button, and then you know that the platter driving system is on the opposite side, so something on this lower side should be the system. With belt driven platters, you have probably a device that looks like that, like a cylinder, and this cylinder is going to be quite shallow, because when you are trying to make a floppy disk drive motor, you have to have some space in order to place the coils for the electric motor. And this means that probably you're going to have a certain height difference between the bottom side of the floppy disk drive unit and the part that actually mounts to the or actually connects to the floppy disk drive, to the removable floppy you place inside the unit. And this means that probably you're having a profile that is slightly higher than on one that is for a belt drive. I didn't have that many units in order to draw a conclusion, but this is a guess I'm having. So on this unit that is belt driven, you're going to see quite, I don't know if you can shine a light now, and probably I don't have that many hands, so it's quite difficult to show you, but rest assured, if you see something inside, that the lower part of the floppy drive is actually shallower in this unit than it is in this one. You may have a certain indication due to the bevel over here that is slanted less than the one over here, though I'm not entirely sure if this one could be again a reliable indication. And this one has, if we are looking somewhat, and you have to believe me because I don't think you can see it on the camera, there is a slight bulge inside. So in this case you have a unit that is direct driven, because that's the correct term, and one that is belt driven. Unfortunately, you cannot place them one in place of the other. With these ones it's quite interesting, because this one is belt driven, this one could be direct driven, although I'm not entirely sure if this is the case because I haven't used the unit. And so what happens? If I'm looking inside, I can, however, assume that it's direct driven, because I'm seeing again a slightly higher let's say, construction inside that may house the direct driving motor. On the other side, on the other hand, this one has a clearly shallower one and a smaller diameter protrusion. Actually, it's almost level. Of course, this may be due to the technology that was available at that time, but keep in mind, two compact laptops, and one of them, this one, unfortunately, has a floppy drive that cannot be used. You may be thinking, oh, but there may be someone that could be releasing modern floppy drives that could be used instead of these ones. Unfortunately, this is not the case, because if you're going to look closely again, you're going to notice that both of these drives have again a different position for the eject button, and differences are not going to stop over there. They are going to extend further up to a different connector position, and you may wonder why this is so important, because in a desktop you are just connecting your cable and that's it. Unfortunately, with laptops you have cables that may be like this. So there are standard interfaces, but these interfaces can vary widely between one laptop manufacturer to another, and even the position where the cable connects on the motherboard may be different. This means that finding a replacement that works perfectly is very difficult, and I want to stress that more than perhaps you may consider it appropriate, because actually so many things are against you that I think you have very little chances of finding a suitable replacement for a floppy drive other than one that probably was used in a similar unit. Finding cross-compatible floppy drives, I think, is out of the question. No matter how many laptops you have in your collection, I don't think you will be able to do that successfully. There may be some situations where it will work, of course, with some limitations, but I think that most of the time this is not going to be possible. And unfortunately, again, trying to find a replacement for a belt driven floppy with one that is direct drive and that has much better reliability is very difficult. So the moment you're trying to think about using a laptop with a working floppy drive, I think you have to settle for the fact, if the floppy drive is belt driven, you're going to find out very soon this, you should actually not dwell any time and resources on trying to find a replacement, because it's not going to work. Okay, so let me move further, but first of all, I would like to stress again the aspect. These two units are compact branded, these two units are Toshiba branded, but none of them actually has the same, let's say, connection interface. None of them has the same mounting positions, probably. I cannot tell for certain, but many times the holes do not align in the same way. So you have to take that into account. And just as importantly, if you have certain requirements for a front plate shape, plastic front plate shape, you're not going to find them readily with the same success. So I think that you already have a lot of issues that you have to think about. Okay, let's move on to another manufacturer. And let's place them aside. This is Siemens. You may be surprised, because Siemens manufactured laptops many years ago. Unfortunately, with most manufacturers, it's a hit and miss situation regarding floppy disk drives. In this case, we are having a floppy disk drive that, even though it's being labeled as for a Siemens system, and Siemens Nixdorf laptops were not particularly appreciated for their reliability, mainly due to the plastics quality, and also, but not, things do extend much more than that. Build construction, some design concepts were not particularly wonderful. So Siemens Nixdorf laptops are not generally that sought after or such a good purchase compared with other models. But the issue does not center over there. There are laptops that have been purchased, but in that time IBM and Toshiba were the most important manufacturers. So Siemens was not a first tier laptop manufacturer in my opinion. Why this is important, however? Because these floppy drives are direct driven, and this is important because for a laptop that was built around 1996 1997 there was still no guarantee if it would have the reliable floppy drive that you may consider. Again, a different connector. So I'm just stating facts over here that you may still find issues. However, with this kind of laptop, I don't think you are going to have an issue. And from my perspective, I have not tested enough Siemens Nixdorf laptops, but some of them, especially in the 486 manufacturing era, have floppy drives that fail. However, from one point further, they switched to direct drive floppy disk drives, and this meant that no such issues happened. And this is one of the later models. I think it was from a Pentium 2 laptop that doesn't have this issue. So you have to be even with large manufacturer or even on a long lineup, that you may still find floppy disk drives that may fail due to the direct drive system, or one that can probably live for decades, as is the case with this particular floppy disk unit. And keep in mind that even some Taiwanese or Hong Kong manufactured laptops that do not have known brands attached to them may have floppy disk drives that are reliable or not. Again, it's a gamble. So this is another important aspect I stress again. Alright, moving further. This unit is from a Dell laptop, and again we are having a floppy disk drive that is very reliable. I think it was manufactured around 1997. It may be the same floppy disk drive that was used for a couple of models. So from one of the late Pentium MMX models, I think it was a Dell CP166 or something like that. A Dell Latitude, yes, a Dell Latitude CP. Yeah, okay. This floppy disk drive is having a very good reliability. It's a direct drive system. Even if you're going to see some indications of rust over here, you don't have to have any sort of fear, because this floppy disk drive is clearly very well built. So again, you have a good example. Alright, moving further, we have two more units that are for IBM laptops. IBM has been manufacturing laptops for a long time, and in general I think that IBM is the best choice for laptops for a couple of reasons. They had consistent build quality. In fact, of course, you know all too well the story that IBM released the IBM PC, and when it did so, even if at that time there was an issue with reliability of certain parts, IBM did a very good job of manufacturing just about any computing product, because the other manufacturers did not have the extended manufacturing capability and marketing potential, so they had to undercut IBM. Compaq was one of the manufacturers that did so, and this meant that most Compaq products, although Compaq is a well-regarded brand, just as Toshiba and others, I think that in general it did not stand for particular very good quality. However, they made very good products now and then, and I think that this is the aspect that has to be stressed. With IBM, you knew all too well what you were getting, and this means that generally it was top quality. Although it may not have the best designs, because IBM was not concerned that much with design, you may not have a laptop that is overly nice or flashy. On the other hand, other manufacturers had quality that varied from time to time based upon their marketing presence, their manufacturing presence, and of course their goals that have been set. Okay, so we have over here two floppy disk drives that were manufactured by IBM. Although they may look slightly similar, and this is to a certain extent, unfortunately they are not, again, units that can be easily swapped. Let me see. Okay, so you see already the difference in the positioning of the eject drive buttons. So even IBM was not consistent in using the same floppy disk drive design, although this could have probably saved some money down the line. And if we are looking at the interface, you're going to see again a ribbon interface, but just to have a good comparison, I'm going to show you the one from another floppy disk drive that has it visible, so that you can understand clearly why I said that finding a good replacement is quite difficult. Even if those two connectors look roughly similar, okay, now I think you can see them. Just a moment, let me attempt to make better focusing so that you can see what matters the most. Okay, even if you have roughly the same connector, I don't think that the connectors positions are similar, and if you look closely, you're going to notice that there is a slight difference. I don't know if it's from the let's say pins pitch or something else, but they seem slightly different, so I'm not entirely sure you can swap one for the other, even if mechanically they may look quite similar. And this is an issue that I had to consider. Okay, if you're looking closely over here, you may notice that this is a stacked drive unit. It has both a floppy disk drive and a CD-ROM drive. This one was, as far as I can tell, from an IBM 380 ThinkPad laptop. Quite good model, but a bulky one. And this one, I think if I remember correctly, was from an IBM 760 series ThinkPad. So quite a slim laptop model. And this unit was actually having a very interesting removal system, because it's actually a floppy disk drive that can be easily swapped with a CD-ROM drive in the same unit. But however, you cannot probably swap these two drives, even if you would take apart the casing and you would have access to the internals. If you look closely over here, and I'm trying to show you this part, unfortunately it's quite well hidden. Let me see if I can find a better angle. Oh, yes. Let me see, let me make another attempt. Alright, I don't know if you can see it, but there is a connector over here that is exposed, and this connector is actually the interface to the floppy disk drive. I'm pretty sure that the position of this connector is different than the position of this connector, even if both drives have been manufactured roughly in the same period. So again, I'm stressing the importance of this aspect, because as soon as you are going to have a collection and want to make an attempt at keeping it in top shape, you will try to make purchases, or you may try to make swaps so that you could have the best units working. However, as far as I can tell, only between the same laptop series that has been manufactured, you may have very good results with swapping drives. Unfortunately, this will not help a lot, because if floppy drives that had the belt system were being manufactured, you can be certain that there were no direct drive floppy disk units that were released on the same time. So unfortunately you have very little choice. So, after all this long video, I would like to stress the fact that even if it may seem simple and quite straightforward, and you have the experience of swapping so many floppy disk drives on desktop PCs, on laptops it's totally different. Very rarely you will find compatible units between various manufacturers, no matter in what year they were being released. So if you have these hopes, I think it's better to leave them, to set them aside as soon as possible. Don't waste time, don't waste resources, don't waste effort in trying to find floppy disk units that may be swapped between laptops. If you have one that is not particularly is not working properly and you have another laptop that is of the same series, then yes, you can swap them clearly. Unfortunately, in other situations, it's not a good idea. And particularly if you don't know if the unit is a direct drive system or not, I mean, if you can, you have to listen and know if the platter is turning. And if it's so, yeah, then yes, probably you can try to find a replacement unit. But if it's not having that friction noise and the lack of a high-speed motor, electric motor noise, then I don't think it's good to try to find replacements, even from non-working laptops, or from other parts that were salvaged from laptops or even a complete system. So I think it's good to know that you shouldn't waste time trying to have so many floppy disk units that may potentially be used for repairing other laptops. However, I should have a reason for my current floppy drives collection. Well, first of all, you have to understand the fact that for good aesthetics, you should have units that fit very well the same design language that you have on the laptop. In this case, none of the units, perhaps with the exception of this one, is left as a spare part. Most of them are actually used in laptops and can be swapped. This one can be swapped with a CD-ROM drive. This one again can be swapped with a CD-ROM drive. This one can potentially be swapped with a CD-ROM drive, but I do not have because it's a removable floppy disk drive. This one can. So in most cases, you are either going to have an aesthetic reason for your current floppy unit that you are setting it aside just to have a complete looking unit, or there may be a reason why you swapped a floppy disk unit with a CD-ROM, and in that case you have this reason of keeping it, setting it aside and just using it when it's needed. But overall, I am not a fan of trying to have so many floppy disk units and hoping that they're going to work. Or at least not as soon as I found that this is the case. Unfortunately, let's say that some years have passed until I got this conclusion. But anyway, I wanted to share with you this experience, and I hope you will find it interesting and revealing, insightful for your laptop restoration attempts and for your attempts at enjoying all technology. So thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you will like it, and please, if you do so, subscribe. Thank you very much.